Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rosenfeld, founder of Freshwater Investments, and this is Coffee with a T-Bird podcast. I sit down with fellow T-Birds who are making an impact in business, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Each episode features conversations that explore the pivotal moments, personal motivations, and lessons learned on their journeys. Whether you're a student, alum, or someone passionate about business and personal growth, you'll walk away with fresh ideas. This is a bit more than a podcast. It's a platform for connections, storytelling, and celebrating the global spirit of Thunderbird. This podcast is sponsored by Freshwater Investments. At Freshwater, we make it simple for you to invest in large apartment communities across the United States so you can earn passive income, grow your capital, and benefit from real estate tax breaks without owning or managing property yourself. Hi, Gbemi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Alex. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And let's start with that pivotal point in your career when you went to South Korea to launch a new campus of George Mason University. How did that opportunity came up, and what did you feel at that moment?
That's a great question. I look back now and it seems like such a dream, and it certainly wasn't in the plans. I happened to be working at George Mason for President Angel Cabrera, who had been the former president of Thunderbird, and he came and was like, "You're my global person," and I was like, "Yes." And ultimately he's like, "We have this project in South Korea about you. Are you interested in potentially going to work on there?" And I was like, sure. I mean, in a true T-Bird fashion. So ultimately, that project was phenomenal. I ended up going, it was very challenging, obviously, having to learn a new culture, having to navigate the complexities of government and a startup, and doing all of this without knowing the language. And this is where I cannot emphasize the power of the T-Bird network. I immediately looked up all the T-Birds there. We actually had several that were in high positions and working for American companies or Korean companies, including a few that were my classmates and then others that had graduated way before. So from a cultural perspective, my classmate Hoki was phenomenal. I dragged him to take me shopping, to help me understand the cultural dynamics, and he and another T-Bird, Sajin, were really good on that. And then when I was looking for sort of support on trying to introduce the Korean, the U.S. institution and culture to Korea, then I tapped into several T-Birds who had been there for a while and were more seasoned, like John Schultz and a bunch of different people who had worked at Korea for a while. So I would say it was a fascinating trip, but my T-Bird network certainly saved me so much, and it was really helpful in helping me be successful with that project.
Excellent. Well, I want to drill in a little bit on what you just said. So you said cultural differences. So can you give us an example of any specific business etiquette, specifics of Korean culture, or anything else that was surprising for you and you need to make some adjustments?
No, absolutely. I mean, one, Korea is relatively, and all of this will be some relative level of generalization, but there is a stronger leaning towards the patriarchy. And so being a woman obviously had some challenges just from trying from a position of authority. Also being a foreigner, there was some complexities there, and and the language was mostly a barrier, right? And Korea is super sophisticated. I consider it my second home. However, for the most part, people are a little more hesitant to speak in English than in other parts of the world that I had traveled or lived in. And so it was just trying to create a sense of equal vulnerability where I would speak the little Korean I knew, just so there's the sense of there's no need to be embarrassed. My Korean sucks. Let's work it out and let's try to connect on that level. And then the other thing from a professional perspective that's really key is people say the U.S. is relational when it comes to business, but honestly, compared to some other cultures, I would say no. Well, Asia is very relational. And so when setting up a lot of things, it was really key to respect that aspect of the culture. And there were moments where we had tensions between the cultures, in that the U.S. MO would be, let's have it documented, let's get it done immediately, let's bring in lawyers. And I had to really be that cross-cultural bridger and say, this isn't going to work in this context. It's really about meeting the people face to face, understanding when Koreans don't say yes, or when they say yes in a meeting, it's not necessarily yes, we agree with what you're saying. It's yes, we've heard you and we want to save face and we want to make sure everybody feels heard and respected, but it doesn't necessarily translate into what a US will assume as a done deal. And so it usually takes a bit more time. It's really rooted in a deep respect, mutual respect. And sometimes the pace at which the West does business isn't aligned with that. So that created some challenges in trying to execute what I needed to do. But eventually I was able to sort of navigate that, slow it a bit down on the US side, speed it a bit up on the Korean side, and kind of find a happy in between. But it wasn't without its challenges. And
how did you earn that respect?
So I went back last year to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the campus, and it was really interesting. So I was able to speak with my team and people I had hired and who had now been there for 10 years. And I just had conversations about it. And they told me that they were just really impressed at how much I cared about the culture. Like their experiences with expats had been really transactional, where they came and they just wanted to get the expat benefits and live their best life. And they would see me. Korea is a very hardworking culture. And most days I was working till midnight. I was trying to get it to start up. And so I literally didn't have a life for the first few years. And so I think, and it wasn't something I was doing necessarily to earn their respect. It was just a necessity of like, I was driven, wanted it to be successful. And ultimately, I think what they took away from that was this person actually cares about us and cares about the fact that even when she leaves, that this continues to be sustainable. And for them, that was a turning point in how they really felt like that made them feel like this is someone who cares about the culture, doesn't want to come just sort of in a colonial way, like collect everything they can and leave the culture, but actually wants to contribute and make it better. So I think that was key. Eating lunch with people is actually so important. Like, so normally I would work through lunch, and in America with some, you'd eat lunch at your desk. And actually Korea is more of a collectivist culture. And so I would force myself and set alarms, or my assistant would come and be like, you should go eat lunch with the team, right? And so just doing that and continuing to foster that relationship. The other thing was trying to find a balance, right? So we were building our own microculture. So it couldn't be fully Korean. It couldn't be fully American. It was an American institution in Korea. So I really tried to create this sort of unique culture that appreciated all cultures, also because we were trying to attract students from everywhere. So as much as our global brand was America, we were rooted in a Korean existence, right? So those two had to be the dominant culture. As a T-Bird, it was important for me to create a global culture. So we set up events where we celebrated like Latin heritage. I partnered with African embassies. I met with people, the ambassador from Kazakhstan. So my goal was to sort of expose my staff and students to different aspects of the world to sort of stretch their global mindset. And I think doing that sort of allowed them to grow as well as recognize that this is a very unique place and we couldn't just kind of hold on to one or the other, and just create our own sort of George Mason Korea like culture. And I think that's really worked. A lot of students thrived. I know I spoke with some of the African students. They really enjoyed it. They learned a lot, but we also taught a lot about our own different cultures to the people we were interacting with. So one of my staff, everyone called like Jollof Gigi, because there's a Nigerian dish called jollof rice, which I introduced to the team. I taught a cooking class as a staff development activity. And now she fell in love with it and would always want it. So she's more African than me when it comes to this at this point. So I thought that was really fun, like learning cultures, introducing your culture, and then creating your own unique culture at the campus.
That's great. Can you walk me through more mechanics of opening a new campus in a new country? Like, do you need to find a building? Do you need to hire people? Do you need to run advertising campaign to attract new students? What did it take?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of what I do for a living. And so I would say it depends, which is always like the generic answer. I can speak to Korea, but that was a very unique experience in that the Korean government was setting up a special economic zone and they wanted to build an education hub. And you see this sort of thing happen in places like Dubai, Qatar, Malaysia. So those areas, the government is invested in creating a global global university ecosystem environments. Typically in Qatar, for example, it's funded through the Qatar Foundation. It's highly lucrative. They pay for a lot of things. Certain countries don't offer the same benefits. But mostly for the Korea campus, the government was very invested in this. So they built the building. George Mason, as a public university, could not use Virginia funds outside of Virginia. So that was what made this a very complex project, in that I couldn't sleep at night because we had to make sure all the revenue we generated was able to cover all of our expenses. You can't get bailed out by like Big Brother back in the US. So that's different than some private universities can do that. Some models have where the campuses are paid for, the buildings are paid for by alumni. So it's a very global expansion in terms of how universities open globally is going to vary. I'd also had the opportunity to work at an institution, Carnegie Mellon, and in Africa, that there wasn't an ecosystem. It was just one school. It was the only American school based out of that. So that model is completely different. So the Korean model was the government built it. Their goal was to have 10 universities on this campus. And in the first few years, we would each come with our own specialty. So George Mason was really good in economics. We had Nobel Prize winners in it. That was one of the programs we launched. And then SUNY, for example, brought a different program, and University of Utah brought a different program. So the idea would be we would each offer different programs, but collectively that ecosystem would be one global university. So students could come and study different things across the board. That has melded a little bit now, where everyone's sort of playing Hunger Games and offering similar programs, just depending on what the market is. But certainly we start with a pestle analysis. You have to understand your why. So why Korea? Why does it make sense for us? At George Mason at that time, we had a lot of interactions. Faculty had done research or had partnerships. Korea, Virginia is one of the largest Korean populations in the United States. We had some connections with government officials, so there was a rationale that aligned with our institutional sort of priorities. So if it was a different country, it may not have made sense. So you start with that. You do a due diligence on what kind of program. So we always did like a market study. We're accredited by our U.S. Accreditors, but we also work very closely with the Ministry of Education in Korea. And so you have to sort of serve two gods and make sure you go through the right process. Marketing is a challenge because you have to stand out in the midst of everybody else. And at the time, which was about over a decade ago, Koreans were not familiar with this model. So they understood a Korean university and they understood an American university. They didn't understand an American university in Korea. So what's the degree? Is it better? Is it worse? Like, is it the same? And so we had a 3+1 model where the students would be in Korea for 3 years, and then ultimately they would go to the U.S. for 1 year. And we moved around when they would do that, eventually settling on the last year. That way students are able to also have the opportunity to potentially stay for an OPT and get the opportunity to work or go back to Korea, right? And so they can get the U.S. experience, which was really key because they were getting a U.S. degree. So you would do that. We used all the same sort of marketing and recruiting strategies. Our recruitment admissions was done mostly at that time when we first started by our U.S. office. So we were on the ground attending fairs. We really had to create like a brand awareness campaign. So I did a lot of that. The Korean moms, who we lovingly call the ajumas, they're very powerful. And so the first thing I did was to really understand that dynamic. I held several brunches where I brought like influential mothers to the camp. I did a Korea day where I was trying to create a differentiator, like why should you send your kids to this school here versus in the U.S. or to a Korean school in Korea. And I was very clear to my team, you can't out-Korean a Korean university. They're very good. They know what they offer. So you don't come to us to go work at Samsung. I would highly encourage you to go to one of the top schools in Korea. Those are the feeder schools. That makes sense. But if you want your kids to have the option to be a global connector, to be able to translate both Korean and American culture, culture, then you come to us. So very quickly, what I did was invite these T-Birds that I mentioned who were working for Ford Korea, Bank of America Korea, or Korean companies that had a U.S. subsidiary. And I had them speak to the importance of having people who can slide into both cultures comfortably. And that became our unique value proposition. And that's what helped us grow from 20-something students to over 1,000 students.
That's a great story. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Can you tell me about your family, about your childhood? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and grew up, there were three of us, three kids. I was the middle child. My parents were always very globally inclined. My dad did international business. He had worked in oil and gas and then banking and eventually became an entrepreneur. My mom was always sort of a do-gooder. She worked in the government and so worked for different ministries in the government. And ultimately, I think they remind me a bit of when we were in school and people asked, what is the brand of a T-Bird? And people like, who would the leaders be for a T-Bird? And the answer was Richard Branson and the Dalai Lama, if you remember that. And for me, that was already existed in my family. So my dad was the quintessential business guy, very for-profit, like very focused. And my mom was a bit of the sort of do-gooder, let's help the world. And so I grew up with the luxury of having both influences. And I think that's what sort of drove my career path and the choices I've made in the future. So I started up banking because as an African child, you're one of four things. You're either a lawyer, banker, engineer, or a disappointment. Pick one. And so ultimately I started that career. But eventually as I did that, I realized that I wanted to transition into something that personally felt more rewarding and had the opportunity to make an impact in a different way.
Got it. And did you have any? You went to high school in Lagos, right? Did you have any jobs while you were in high school?
No, everyone asked that. It was so interesting to be in the States. In Nigeria, just because over 200 million people, and highly skilled and high unemployment rate. So no one's trusting high schoolers to do anything, and so they could easily find someone with a PhD to work at a McDonald's. So unfortunately, we didn't have that exposure. My first job was probably not until I started college at Arizona State, and I worked at Jamba Juice on campus. I remember the first time they sent me into the freezer, and I was like, what in the world is this? And everyone laughed. They're like, oh my God, she's so spoiled. I was like, it's not that I'm spoiled, it's that we didn't work in high school. And most of that is also if you're fortunate, and I can only speak to my family and my friends, is that we were fortunate to be able to afford to go to school, and my parents are able to support us for that. And so ultimately their focus is we're doing this, so you have zero reason to not excel in school, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
There's no free lunch. It was like a 99 isn't good enough because you're not working, right? Like you should get 100. So there were pros and cons to this, but ultimately it was a very high achieving sort of culture where you were forced to. So I always laugh in high school because I think when I came to the States, people were taking like 5 classes in high school or maybe 6, or a couple people took AP. In Nigeria, in high school, I went to a school called Queen's College, which was really well regarded and very sort of hard to get into. But we had like 15 or so classes. So we were in school all day and you still had to do sports and everything. And I couldn't decide if they wanted us to be MacGyver or a Stepford wife, because we had to do everything from like food and nutrition and clothing and textile and home economics. And then the next day we're also taking technical drawing and electrical engineering and woodwork. And so literally it was so intense. We had so many courses and you were exposed to so many things. So that was really complex and challenging to keep up and take your mind from STEM to arts to all these different things. But it was really helpful because it made school extremely easy at the beginning when I transitioned to the US.
Got it. And who were your biggest influencers while you were growing up? Family members, mentors, role models?
I would say my mom. My mom has always been sort of my role model. I've just always appreciated her approach to life, her kindness to people, her strength and confidence. And she was a very religious person, so sort of her unshakable faith in that everything will work out for good. So I just always loved how like we would go to her office in the government and everybody from the cleaning lady to like the big boss and the people all knew her and spoke of her kindly because she treated people really well, the subtitle of post. And so it was sort of something that I saw modeled to me, and it was something I try and aspire to do.
Did you have any challenges, any formative challenges while you were growing up that maybe impacted you in a good way later on?
Yeah, I mean, I think having African parents is a challenge, but ultimately, it's a blessing. It's a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a challenge. But ultimately, I would laugh and say, I think it was in primary school, and I had sort of always been first for many years, and I'd skipped a couple grades, and one semester I came second. And I remember just being so devastated. Mostly, I'm not sure if it's because I didn't come first or it was because the entire class celebrated that I finally was not first. And it was just so hurtful. It sounds really childish, but I remember at that point, my mom came and said, "You're not always going to be first," because I didn't go home. I stayed on campus, and she had to come. And it was a moment in life that just taught me that you're going to not always be the best at everything, and how you handle that is also sort of instrumental to how you handle challenges that are going to come, which who knew adulting was going to be even more crazy than not coming first in primary school. But I had been first for 10 semesters. And so it was my first sort of childlike encounter with failure. And people would argue that it's first world problems, second is not failure. But for me, it felt like failure because I'd always sort of been first. But it was also a moment where I was forced to sort of encounter the fact that you're not always going to be the one in every situation, and how it started to build resilience, which I have found to be really helpful as I've encountered different complexities and challenges in my life and career.
Excellent. Let's fast forward to your Thunderbird story. Let's talk about the time when how did you hear about Thunderbird? How did you make the decision to go to Thunderbird?
Yeah, Thunderbird was really interesting for me because I had gone to Arizona State and I was in international business and economics. While I was there, all my professors who were in the international business field were like, based on your background, you need to go check out this school. I honestly had not heard of Thunderbird. And so I was like, okay, I'll look it up. So I didn't do it. Then I worked for the Arizona legislature, and one of the senators I was working for actually was a T-Bird alum. And so we had hosted a delegation from Nigeria and other international places. And he's like, "You're so good with global. Have you heard of the school? You should go check it out." And so he ended up even writing my recommendation letter. And so it just became this noise in the place of everyone that I knew. And I was looking at the typical school, Stanford. I was trying to stay on the West Coast. I hate being cold. And so I was looking at Cali, and then, and Thunderbird. I remember meeting, Judy Johnson, Dean Johnson, and she's like, "I don't care that you got into Stanford. You're coming to Thunderbird." And just their approach and how warm they were, and how I just got there and it was completely different. I didn't know what to expect, and it wasn't the campus. We all know that Glendale campus needed help. It wasn't the most best in class buildings, but there was an intangible feeling, that mystique we talk about, that just made it such an incredible place. And everybody was so kind, and I heard all the different languages. And at ASU, which was a remarkable institution from a technical perspective, it wasn't at that time extremely diverse. It's not the ASU we know now. But at that point, the only few international people I interacted with were all of us that were in the honors college. Right? That I stepped out, and it was very much an American school, which was not bad. It just wasn't very global. And so to get to Thunderbird and hear someone switch from German to Russian to Spanish to French, I finally just had this sense of peace. And it was just wow, everyone else is as weird as I am, and this place is incredible. And people just seemed so creative and different. And to find that gem in Arizona back then was 20 years ago, right? It just felt like home. And immediately my parents didn't understand my choice back then, but now they're like, okay, it makes sense, because they were just more familiar with bigger brands, right? But Thunderbird was, I would still say till today, one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. And what were you involved at school, while at school? Did you participate in any clubs, any student government?
Yes. I mean, what wasn't I involved in would probably be the easiest thing. At that point, I was relatively younger than my classmates. There were a few of us that had come in through this special program. And so I was involved with everything. Back then, I was like the Energizer Bunny. I was president of Africa Club. I was in Thunder Dance. I was a member of the student government. I supported the board when they had meetings. I did everything. I probably slept 2 hours a day at Thunderbird. If there was something to be done, I did it. We did Model UN. I was part of Finance Club. I think I joined Consulting Club. I basically joined everything that I could do just because I was really intrigued and just really loved the opportunity to learn from all the different things. So I was highly, highly, highly involved, which is why when I graduated, I got like the President's Circle Award. And I also was the Barton Kalyans Award recipient for my class. I think it was because I was involved both on the student side and on the faculty and on the administration side.
Great. And what are your favorite memories about being at Thunderbird?
Definitely regional nights, I think, and like Thursday pub nights. And so those were just a moment where we've had an intense week. You either had FORAD or you had to do Hosseini's like crazy statistics project, and we could just come and unwind. And we had different students DJing. We had like our Thunderbird playlist, and everybody would just dance. And we were dancing from Shakira to Romanian songs to all kinds of stuff. So it was just this hub where the world came and we all connected and just could relax. I really enjoyed that. And then the regional nights was just an opportunity to showcase that culture to Arizona and other people. And I think I planned about 16 of those. And it was just really such a memorable opportunity because I would learn about Indian culture because I would plan the MENA nights or the Asian nights or whatever. So it was just a way to have a continuous learning outside of the classroom, but really sort of continue to feed into that global mindset and learn about cross-cultural things.
And thank you. And what is your current involvement with Thunderbird?
I'm still very involved with Thunderbird. I'm a member of the TGAN, which is the Global Alumni Network Board, Advisory Board, and I mentor students. I do career service sessions. I still basically help recruit when I can. I attend recruiting sessions. My mom laughs and says, "You bleed blue," and I really do. Anything Thunderbird needs, I typically make myself available to do so.
So tell me a little bit more about your TGAN involvement. What does it take, and what are you guys working on right now?
Yeah, so TGAN sort of was the evolution after sort of the complex times we went through with when Thunderbird was going through sort of a financial complexity, and we had kind of these broken alumni groups, and finally everyone agreed to sort of pull it back together and create a board that would be unified and support the institution. So that's what TGAN is. It's made up of, I want to say, maybe about 100 people, but I would say maybe 60 are active, and we're from all over the world, and we cut across different classes. And so it's a group of alums who are just invested in the future of Thunderbird and serve as advocates, ambassadors, champions for the institution. So we have different subcommittees, everybody looking at how can we help with the school with fundraising, how can we look at executive education programs, how can we work on the student experience. So you join whichever committee aligns with your interest, and we normally sit down with the dean and have conversations. We meet a couple times a year. One is always in Arizona, which is nice, so you get to go back and see the campus, interact with students, and then one tends to be at a global location. So last year it was in London, it's been in China, so it just depends. But the group, it's a great way for us to sort of catch up with each other, learn what each other is doing, and see how we can make impactful contributions to the university.
So if any of our listeners are interested in joining this board, what would you recommend?
I would recommend that they think about the why. There is a financial obligation you have to make a minimum contribution to the school, and then you have to make yourself available. So it's not a board where you can just say, I'm doing it, and not show up. The goal is to have like highly engaged, highly committed. So you have to think about, is this something I have the time to do and I'm willing to do? And be sure to commit and reach out to the alumni office and introduce yourself. They have their own criteria because they try to balance it out in terms of making sure they have representation from different classes, industries, regions. So there's So it might be like, hopefully, if you're interested, that there's a need for what you bring to the table, or you would have to wait. There's a 3-year cycle, so people rotate off, and so they're constantly adding people. So if you're committed, you're willing to make a financial and a time commitment beyond the financial, I think is really key. Then I would reach out to alumni relations and express your interest, or look up the members of TGAN and reach out to them, and they can also nominate you.
Okay. Great, thank you. Let's switch to your current job and where are you based? What do you do, and what university are you working for?
So I work I'm still in higher education. I'm based in Miami, and I work for Northeastern University. So my role I was their inaugural vice president for global expansions. That my department was responsible for assessing different mergers and acquisition opportunities and looking for ways to help the university expand its footprint around the world. We currently have about 13 or 14 campuses globally. 3 of those we did through an acquisition, and the others were sort of greenfield where we did that. So I evaluate a lot of global opportunities, identify if they're fit for our institutional priorities, and then write out a strategic plan for how to move forward.
So can you tell us about a day in your professional life right now?
A day, there's no sane day. No day is the same, and no day is relatively sane. So no, it's always varies. Sometimes I'm fielding calls. Sometimes I'm meeting with international delegations. Sometimes I'm doing research analysis I'm doing a pestle analysis. I have like 100-point spreadsheet where I look at macroeconomic trends, which countries are seeing a boost in population, high school, in college age population, where is GDP growing, who's spending what amount of their GDP on higher ed. So basically I'm always doing a market scan to see where there could be potential opportunities. So that's what I do on the outbound side. And on the inbound side, when I get calls and inquiries, I also evaluate those opportunities.
And what are 3 main focus areas for you in your job?
It's identifying where would be the best, like what part of the world needs the kind of high quality education that the institution provides, identifying where there are risks and trying to create a contingency plan for those, and then constantly ensuring that we're creating an environment where global mindset and a global student experience is thriving.
And what are the biggest challenges right now for you?
I think anyone in higher ed can understand that there's complexities in the world, and I think challenges just go around ensuring student safety and that people still feel that the U.S. is still a great destination for a high quality education, and they will be welcome and able to make contributions here, as well as trying to ensure that we're just continuing to make an impact and we're just riding the waves. Like, there's always going to be complexities in the market, and our goal is to make sure we create enough shock absorbers so we can come out of this on top.
And what's the most exciting part of your work right now?
Exciting part of my job is always just sort of learning about the world, and thinking creatively about where else can you go, because a lot of the obvious markets, there's a lot of political and economic changes that are making you rethink what opportunities there are. So really thinking through, maybe it's emerging markets and those don't come without their own challenges. What do you do in those markets? Where we're seeing population growth is not in the developed part of the world, right? Or in the Western part of the world. We're seeing population growth in Africa. We're seeing it in India. We're seeing it in different places. So how do you do business there? How do you mitigate any potential risks? How do you sort of understand the cultural dynamics and all the different sort of complexities that come with going into an emerging market? So I think that's always dynamic, and learning about it and trying to think through how you can be successful in those has a very entrepreneurial feel to it.
Can you talk a little bit about the higher ed industry, like for people who have no idea about it? Like, is it a profitable industry? Is how large it is? The main players, maybe?
I mean, I think the funniest thing was people don't think of higher ed as an industry, right? They're like, aren't you those people who kind of teach and do something? And so I'm usually, because I came from corporate, I hear a lot of sort of dismissiveness from my corporate friends who don't get that we're basically an industry and a business. We just have a value-based product or service. So I think, it's complicated. It always varies with the kind of institution. First of all, right, you have the established institutions institutions who have large endowments. You have public institutions who have a mission to their state on how to operate. You have the small liberal arts universities who are sort of facing more complexities because they can't spread their cost across like a larger base. So you have to first of all know that there's like over 3,000 universities in the United States, and then put them in different categories. We're seeing a lot of financial stresses for a lot of institutions. There's a lot of rhetoric around the value of an education. Is it worth the student loans and the debt that people are going into? Ultimately, the data has shown that a degree is going to make you financially better in the long run than someone who doesn't have a degree. But we are in a moment where we're forced to also pivot and also continue to think through what our model is. How can we offer different options for students? So for those who are not in a financial position or for some personal reasons can't do the traditional 4-year in person, how do you create these sort of stackable credentials? How do you do micro learning with all the shifts with AI and all the new sort of frontier technologies? How do you continuous learning is going to be really key, or lifelong learning, whatever you want to call it. So how do you create products that people like you and I who've been out of school for a long time can still continue to improve, because you're going to be seeing a lot of shifts to a lot of structural unemployment where traditional jobs are going to go away, but they're going to be new jobs. But people need to reskill to get into those opportunities. So I was just reading the World Economics Forum Future of Work report. Anyone interested in sort of that, I highly encourage you to read it. And it shows the data on where the market is going and what are the future-proof jobs that you can do so that you're not impacted by this sort of monumental change that's happening with AI.
So my daughter is going to college in the fall.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What would you suggest she studies, given all the changes in the marketplace with AI?
I know it's always such a challenge, because I always get people in the liberal arts who are like, everyone cannot like only study STEM, right? So I think ultimately the answer to that starts with, I love that Japanese phrase, I'm going to butcher it, ikigai, right? I think it's, ikigai. And ultimately it says you have to, when you're making a decision, you start with sort of, what are you good at? What do you love? What is going to contribute to the world? And what is someone willing to pay for? So I think somewhere, if you make it a complicated Venn diagram, that in between is the sweet spot, right? Because you can be good at something, but you don't love it, right? So I was good at banking. I don't think I woke up dreaming of like financial markets every day, right? So if you do that, you may get to burn out sooner than somebody else. You may love something and you're not good at it. Well, you don't want a doctor who likes being a doctor, but kills every patient, right? So there's that moment. And then also you can be good at it, you can love it, and no one is willing to pay you for it. Well, that's just a hobby. Right? Like there's no results of that. And ultimately, what does the world need? So my advice to your daughter would be, think through what her skills are and what she's passionate about, and not sort of ignore those, because if you're generally good at something and you enjoy, you're going to work harder, you're going to keep learning it, you're going to keep improving. But also, I always say, follow your heart, but take your brains with you. You also have to look at the marketplace and see what are the jobs right now. How can you do maybe combined degrees? So if you're passionate about dance, could you maybe do dance and business management? So you always want to sort of hedge your risk by also doing something that you're really good and passionate about, but adding things that can make you market ready. So in this point, I encourage every student I meet and all the students I mentor, everything around big data, AI, I would say data analytics, like you want to understand it, because while you don't need to be a perfect coder, I heard this feedback the other day that AI is not going to replace jobs, right? Like everyone's jobs. People who understand AI are going to replace jobs. So really anybody who can right now have the opportunity to interject AI classes, data analytics classes, these sort of technological frontier classes into their degree, I think will be highly competitive in today's marketplace.
Okay. Does AI changes your thinking about your career in the future?
Absolutely.
Are you adjusting your career goals with the advance of AI?
I don't know about it's not changing it fully. I think it's helping me evolve in how I think about it. So for the work that we do, it's a lot of people are scared of students are going to cheat with AI, blah, blah, blah. But I think, like, for example, ASU is one of the schools that has been truly innovative and has found ways to integrate AI into the classroom, right? So I think all of us, regardless of what degree you study or what your job is, we can't sort of hide from it and bury our head in the sand. AI certainly is a disruptor for education, but also in a good way, right? Like, so the challenge of it is that some of our faculty who did their degrees decades ago are also going to need reskilling and upskilling to kind of get up to speed with it, because at some point it could be the students they're teaching are more savvy about these things than the person teaching it. So we're going to see some friction there, because you have to sort of understand, how do you teach it? How do you encourage people to keep learning what's new? And there's also the complexity of, we don't even know the future. So you're going to teach what we know now, and it could be obsolete in like 2 to 5 years. So from an educational perspective, I see it as an opportunity for higher educational institutions to continue to generate content and value in a way that people are continuing to learn, right? So we're not in a regime where you could just get a degree and be done. Your degree is not going to be able to save you alone. You're going to have to keep refreshing that. And that's what I'm doing personally. I took an AI masterclass a couple of weeks ago. So for me, it's just understanding it and thinking about ways I can use it to accelerate the work that I do or make myself more efficient.
Okay, let's wrap up with some personal reflection. What motivates you right now?
What motivates me right now? I think while I was at Thunderbird last month, I had this phenomenal mentoring session with what we call the Share Scholars, which are students from emerging markets. And I was so inspired. Like, we had a young woman from Africa who had designed just a water filtration and a sustainable water filtration mechanism, and had received funding from like the Turkish government to do this. She just thought she wants to help the people in her country and wants to make it affordable, but also has this drive to not make the earth like worse off. Just the kind of students, and everyone talks about Gen Z, and we know all the complications and the downside effects of Gen Z. But ultimately, I was really inspired by the ones I met, and it gave me hope for the future, that there are people who genuinely are doing their best to be creative, and they don't seem to have the same fear or barriers that we may have had, where we were a lot more risk averse. Like, they truly believe they can do it, and they go out and try, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that just sort of reminded me to not kind of get settled or let the environment determine possibilities, and to continue to challenge myself to be creative and take calculated risks and try new things. So that really motivated me recently, in seeing like the world is you listen to the news and sometimes it feels like everything's falling apart. But in the midst of it all, there are these people who are truly trying to make a difference and really committed to making the world a better place. So that inspires me.
Thank you. And what advice would you give to Thunderbird students who are looking for their first job right now?
I would say we all have gone through moments where it feels impossible. Like, people graduated during the financial crisis, people graduated. So I know when I talk to young people, there's a sense of sort of a downer because they feel the market is challenging. It seems like everyone's getting fired, or there's a large unemployment. I would say your networks are going to be key. So learning how to effectively network, and that does not mean sending crazy messages on LinkedIn that are impersonal. Like, use AI tools to be effective. You can find ways to customize and use whatever you need to create personalized, intentional communications to people and reach out. I would say that's going to be really key now more than ever, is who you know, how you present yourself, what your digital brand is. So everyone's searching for people online now. So you want to make sure you're very cognizant of how people see you online. So especially if you're job searching, this is not the time to post your drunken pictures. And if you do, you may want to put those on private mode, but you want to really be cognizant, because in a world of technology, everything is findable. So I want to say, make sure you network, make sure you think of yourself as a brand, and what does that brand say about you? Just communicate the kind of roles you're looking for, reach out to people who may work in those roles, respectfully ask for informational interviews, use the school's resources as much as you can. And all of those should hopefully, it may take time, but ultimately that's my approach when I was in school, and it worked out very well for me.
Thank you. Do you have any messages to all Thunderbird alumni?
Yeah, I mean, keep being awesome, keep being these global misfits who make the world a better place. Connect back with the school, I would say. I know several people do it. I have many, but I also know many of my classmates, because of life and adulting, have been disconnected. I would say get back, figure out what the school is doing, find ways to contribute either financially or through mentoring or through jobs or through recruiting. It takes a village, and I think Thunderbird can only continue to succeed if we all do our part to make it the great place that we found it and try to make it a better place than we left it.
Gbemi, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give now to a 20-year-old self?
To my 20-year-old self, sleep more. I think I cultivated really bad sleeping habits, and it is, as you get older, that becomes less sustainable. So had I started with better sleep habits, I think I would be better off now.
And what's your, I know you travel through so many countries. What's your next dream destination?
Well, there's my dream destination and there's where I'm going next. So my dream destination is actually, I would love to go to French Polynesia. So I had a trip planned during COVID and it got canceled, and I just haven't had the time to make it back there. So Bora Bora, Tahiti, like that part of the world is really fascinating to me, and I would love to do that. But I am excited about sort of an upcoming trip. I'm going to be exploring sort of aspects of the Silk Road. So going to a couple of the Stan countries. And I've never been to those, and I just find them so rich with history, and so I'm really excited about those. But in terms of sort of a lazy girl dream vacation, it would be to finally make it to Bora Bora.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. Before we wrap up, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, to have a conversation, invite you for a cup of coffee, if you have time?
Yes, when I can, of course, I'm always open. I would say, and people already do this, so I would say LinkedIn is the best way to reach out, and then based on it, then we can sort of transition to a different communication. Either we connect by Zoom or by phone. But I would say just reach out to me on LinkedIn and be sort of clear about how I can be helpful. Some people are doing that already, so it's like, oh, I see you know this person, can you connect me? But then give me some context, right? So I would say you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Gbemi, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's an amazing journey, and we need to schedule part 2. I didn't ask so many questions.
I'm available anytime for you, Alex. Just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.